Hi, I'm Nawal, and welcome to Mamas and Papas. This show is about active parenting and family lifestyle. On today's show, we talk about children and their eating habits. We go swimming with some toddlers and go behind the scenes of the NICU at Sentin Mediclinic. My guest today is Heinz Winkler. Coming up, we're chatting to nutritionists about children's eating habits.
Statistics show that South Africa has the 5th highest incidence of obesity amongst their kids in the world. Problems and things that could be contributing to this is the modern day lifestyle that we're living in. Typically, people are eating more refined carbohydrates, higher sugars, sugary foods, more saturated fats. There's been a decreased consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, and people tend to go for more convenience foods, quick foods, easy options, buying takeouts, eating on the run, and they're not feeding their kids the nutrition that they need in order to keep themselves healthy.
I think one of the very big problems is that children are spending much too much time in front of TVs and computers. And in fact, they've shown that South African children are spending an average of 32 hours a week in front of a screen. Now, in my day, when I was young, we used to be outside playing every day. And certainly they've shown that the average child should be doing between 60 and 90 minutes of exercise a day. And that would go a long way to addressing the obesity problem that we're seeing.
If you look, for example, at a family that's less wealthy and that doesn't have a lot of money to spend on food, what you find is that many of these families will focus on less expensive options. And often a big one is the staple foods such as large amounts of potatoes or rice or pap or sam, or just a general big carbohydrate base, breads. And many people find that this is what the main source of their dietary intake is. However, they lack the fresh produce, the vegetables, the fruits and salads, and often they serve the starch with high-fat sauces, gravies, depriving their whole family of essential nutrients. And yes, these types of dietary practices may increase incidence of obesity just from having the wrong balance of carbohydrates to proteins and fats, and having too much in the way of refined sugars and refined carbohydrates.
From the point of view of carbohydrates, the good carbohydrates and bad ones. The very bad ones in that some of the carbohydrates are high glycemic index carbohydrates, which means they get into your system very rapidly, but in a couple of hours you're really hungry again. And if you rather choose low GI carbohydrates, you'll find that you actually won't be hungry again after an hour or two. So choose a low GI bread. Rather have little boiled potatoes rather than a big potato. And if you're going to have mealie pup, which is absolutely fine, if you have it cold, it's a low GI product, rather when it's hot, which makes it a high GI product. We know that diabetes is becoming an absolute epidemic in our society. And in fact, we're seeing children that are developing maturity onset diabetes. We used to see it in the 40, 50-year-old people. We're now seeing it in 11, 12-year-olds. And that's directly as a result of being obese. Too much body fat starts causing a whole metabolic problem where you've got all this fat in your system and you then land up developing diabetes because you've got this high sugar that goes up and down all the time and it's really not good for you.
Many parents will say, my child is overweight because I'm overweight, or unfortunately, my daughter is bound to be overweight and she's going to end up being an obese adult because if you look at her family history or her genetics, we're all overweight in the family. The important thing to remember is that yes, there is a genetic link, and sometimes you are born with genes that make you more prone to developing certain chronic diseases or becoming overweight later in life, but you cannot use this as an excuse to grow up to be overweight. There are other ways of controlling your weight, and you really need to look at it and say, I have a family history, or my child has a family history of being overweight or obese, and therefore I need to work that much harder providing my child with the right types of food, in making sure that they exercise, and watching their total calorie intake, and providing them with the principles and the sort of lifestyle modifications that they need to help to prevent them to get there.
I think there's a lot of problems in families, and if you watch what people are eating, you'll be absolutely surprised that if mommy's fat, it's often because she's actually eating wrongly, and she's teaching her children to eat wrongly from a very, very young age. I'm always amused that the people that are walking around the hypermarket eating are the people that are obese. There are massive health risks from the point of view of obese children. Obesity definitely, we know, causes an increase in arthritis, and later years an increase in cancer, a definite increase in diabetes. And generally there's so many factors involved in obesity that we really don't want our children to be there.
To be a winner on Mamas and Papas, all you have to do, follow the instruction on the bottom of your screen. Hans, for some people, giving birth in hospital becomes a bit expensive. What are your plans with Alette?
Well, we're just planning to have kind of the traditional thing. We have a gynecologist. We're going to the hospital and just doing it straight up that way.
Is it because it's your first baby?
It's the first baby, and well, I know there are many other options, but this is the one that we felt most comfortable with.
Great. Today we've got our guests here, Lauren and Catherine.
Hi.
They've opted for different and various options of giving birth. Lauren, you opted for the water birth. Do you want to share with us why water birth?
In fact, in contrast to you, my husband and I had very different views on giving birth. I was adamant, with given all the literature that I'd read, that I wanted a water birth, and he was dead set against it, and it took a lot of convincing from my part to actually turn him round. And if he was here today, he is such an advocate of water births, because we had such a magical and really, really positive experience.
Where did you do it? Was it at home, in hospital?
There are not many
clinic?
places where you can have a water birth. We had our baby at Linkwood Clinic, and I'm having my second one now at Genesis Clinic, which is a clinic specifically only run by midwives.
Yeah.
And with water births, it really is only a midwife supervised birthing process. So there's no gynae really involved at all. All my follow-up appointments were all with the midwife. I didn't really have gynae follow-ups after, say, 28 weeks. And you develop a relationship with your midwife, and it's a very different birthing experience, because she's there right from the very start of your labour, and she kind of talks you through it, and it's a very calm, relaxed environment. And they only really call a gynae if she anticipates that there's something going to be, a little bit of anxiety, or if there's a problem. That's only the time when the gynae is actually called in. But aside from that, the midwife conducts the entire birthing process.
But at the early pregnancy, at your early stage of your pregnancy, how was the involvement of your gynae? Was the gynae involved at that stage?
Absolutely,
until
yeah.
handing
So when you
over?
find out you're pregnant, you go to all the, the key point gynae appointments, and they follow you through until you get past that 20-week scan, when they obviously do the fetal anomaly checks and make sure that everything is on track for a natural birth.
The feeling that I sometimes get is that one woman had a negative experience, and she instills fear in all her friends, and the
It
story
is like
grows,
that.
and it gets tails, and it gets worse, and by the time this woman is pregnant, she's like, I have to have a Caesar, it's the only option.
Yeah, and most
it's-
people have
it's-
decided long ago that they're going to have an epidural regardless.
Yeah.
They don't actually allow themselves to get to the point where they can say, okay, now I
Where you
do
feel the
need it,
pain,
or
yeah.
actually I can
Yeah.
keep going and I can actually do this.
Catherine, your story. You had 3 different birth plans.
Yes,
Why you opted for 3?
Well, when I went to my gynae, I went to the hospital that he was practicing at, and they explained to me that I would labour in the one ward and then go through to the other ward to give birth. And I was standing there going, why? Why would you do that? Why would I have to move? And you're in this pain and you're trying to get through it, and why would you actually have to move? And a friend of mine was just giving birth, and she had found these midwives, and I went to go see them. And when I met them, I knew that they were sent from heaven to help me give birth. And at that stage, Linkwood actually wasn't open yet, and Garden City had an active birth unit. So the midwives could hire the room in a sense, and I just had my midwives, and I gave birth on the bed. And it was an absolutely amazing experience. I was in the water for a lot of the time, and then I was like, I've got to get out of the water, I've had enough. And gave birth naturally on the bed. And then the second time, I really wanted a home birth. I wasn't very happy at the hospital for that the next morning. I actually left at about 8 o'clock. I said, thank you.
What was the problem?
I'm leaving. You know, I'd given birth, and I think it was about 11 o'clock at night, and all I wanted was a cup of tea. And I remember, like, the nurse saying to me, well, I don't think we've got milk. I'm like, I've just given birth with no drugs. And I was like, I just want a cup of tea. And so I just wanted to be at home. And it was an amazing experience to be at home with my midwives. I had the same midwives. And it was such a special thing because everything was there. It was all my stuff was there. And I could, you know, if I wanted to wear those pair of shoes after or slippers, you know,